Happy trade deadline day, everyone, and welcome into MASN All Access. I'm your host, Paul Mancano, going to be joined by Brendan Mortensen shortly. We are going live right around noon Eastern as we break down the latest move by the Baltimore Orioles, and that is Jorge Lopez headed to the Minnesota Twins in exchange for 4 pitching prospects. Let's bring in Brendan here to discuss this. Now, Brendan, we saw the Trey Mancini trade go down yesterday. And today we see the Orioles deal their all-star closer in Jorge Lopez to a team that is hoping to compete in the American League in the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah, I think the Trey Mancini trade was a little bit more expected, given the fact that Mancini and the Orioles had a mutual option for next season. Mancini was more than likely going to be a free agent after next year, which means that that Mancini trade was essentially trading a rental player for the final few months of the season, whereas Jorge Lopez wasn't set to hit free agency until 2025, but the Orioles clearly believe that with this deal, they are maximizing Lopez's value and getting a good return here from the Minnesota Twins.
Jorge Lopez was under team control through the end of 2022, 2023, and 2024. So 2.5 years of team control is what the Twins are getting in Jorge Lopez. They're also getting a guy with a 1.68 ERA and frankly has been one of the better closers in all of Major League Baseball in 2022. We just saw Josh Hader dealt for a huge package of prospects, and while guys like Hader tend to have more of a track record than Jorge Lopez, who was only converted to a reliever at the beginning of this season, or really the end of the 2021 season, the Orioles were dealing a guy that had been very successful so far this season. So there is some risk, however, there. But the Orioles are getting back 4 pitching prospects. Let's take a look at the details of the deal. The Orioles also did send out cash considerations in the deal, but here are the 4 pitchers that they are getting back. Yennier Cano, who's a righty, lefty Cade Povich, righty Juan Nunez, and lefty Juan Rojas. Now, the only guy with Major League experience on this list is Cano. He's got very little Major League experience, and he is the oldest of these 4 pitchers at 28 years old. But Brendan, Cade Povich appears to be the centerpiece of this deal, and it feels like kind of like the deal that the Orioles made a couple off seasons ago when they dealt Dylan Bundy to the Angels in a package that included Isaac Mattson and Kyle Bradish, where the Orioles are getting volume back here. And yes, they're getting a guy who's ranked in Minnesota's top 30 prospects, but they're opting more for quantity as opposed to high-profile prospects here.
Yeah, when you look at the Trey Mancini trade from yesterday, the Orioles got 2 prospects that are now within their top 12 in the top 30 MLB pipeline rankings. But here, I think Povich probably slots somewhere into that 20 to 25 range. But this is still a solid pitching prospect. He is a college left-hander who Steve Molesky reported that he talked to a scout, and a lot of teams were calling the Minnesota Twins asking about Povich. He has a lot of good secondary pitches, an excellent changeup, has also gotten high marks on both his slider and curveball. He is the headliner of this deal, looks to have the potential of maybe a number 4 or a number 5 starter. But you're right, Paul, they get quantity here, and the Orioles improve their pitching depth rather than their top-end pitching, which is what they did with that Mancini deal yesterday.
And Povich was a recent draft pick as well. We've seen the Orioles do this before, where they're essentially getting draft picks back because they're guys that were drafted so recently that they might as well be getting draft picks, guys that perhaps they had their eye on during the draft process but did not have enough picks to go out and draft and then sign. So what they're getting back is guys that they probably liked during that process but weren't able to get. And that's what they're getting in Cade Povich, who is still 22 years old. And this is, again, a difference between the Mancini deal and the Jorge Lopez deal. The 2 guys that the Orioles got back in the Mancini deal were both high A pitchers, but they were both 23 years old, so a little bit older. So what you have in Povich is maybe not a top 10 prospect or a top 15 prospect, but you're getting somebody who is a little bit younger, may have a higher ceiling simply because of how far he is and how advanced he is for his age.
Yeah, Povich is at high A right now, has been pitching very well there, and most scouts believe that Povich will be a pretty fast riser. So maybe before the season is over, we could see Povich as high as AA Bowie this year. And I think Povich has a lot of potential because of his pitch mix. Like I said, he has high marks on all 3 of his secondary pitches, has a solid fastball as well. So that solid pitch mix bodes well for somebody with starter potential.
.340 fielder independent pitching, and a 32% strikeout rate in 16 starts in High A. And you mentioned Double-A Bowie, which is where a lefty named Drew Rom is currently pitching. Now, Drew Rom has a similar stuff in terms of the fastball velocity. May not hit close to triple digits, be up in the 99, 98 range, but maybe if it tops out around 96 with some good secondary pitches, you could see a path for success here with Cade Povich if he follows in the footsteps of Drew Rom, who's one of the Orioles' prized prospects in the system right now.
Yeah, reminds you a little bit of maybe a better version of a Zach Lowther or an Alexander Wells. Not an overwhelming fastball for Povich. It sits at around 92 miles an hour, can top out at 96, but the secondary stuff is really his bread and butter, and that's where he'll find a lot of his success so far this season.
Cano, meanwhile, is an interesting case. We've seen the Orioles turn stuff guys into quality relievers. He is 28 years old, which is just a year younger than Jorge Lopez, but significantly less major league experience. Has not looked very good in that significantly small sample size. 9.22 ERA, over 9 strikeouts per 9 innings, I should say, but a 45% chase rate to go with a 15.2 swinging strike rate. Now, what that means is he's missing a lot of bats, and when opposing hitters are making contact, they appear to be making hard contact. But Brendan, it feels like a very small sample size for us to be judging Yennier Cano already on this, because we just have not seen enough of him at the big league level, and it probably is more instructive to look at what he's done in the minor league level, where he's been very good.
Yeah, Cano is an interesting case because he just hasn't had a lot of coaching, whether it's in the minor leagues or the major leagues so far. He was signed out of Cuba at 25 years old, so he has not been in the United States playing professional baseball for a very long time, but his minor league stats are pretty good, Paul. Like you mentioned, had a 1.90 ERA in AAA, so well worthy of that major league promotion this year, even if in the small sample size he hasn't looked great. So I think Cano is at least intriguing. I know the walk numbers are not very good at the major league level so far, over 7 walks per 9, but somebody else who had really good swing and miss stuff but had really bad walk numbers, Felix Bautista, and we've seen how he has worked out so far, so maybe the Orioles are able to focus in on that command for Cano a little bit and can get those strikeout numbers up while limiting walks.
It's a perfect transition to discuss the rest of this Orioles bullpen, because when you trade your all-star closer, that begs the question, will there be other bullpen pieces on the move? We've seen the Orioles have incredible success with some under-the-radar additions this past offseason in the bullpen specifically. You just mentioned Felix Bautista, who, yes, was already in the Orioles system, but they added Brian Baker, who's had modicum of success out of the bullpen. They also added Cionel Perez, who's been very good as somebody that they added off of waivers in the offseason. They have Dylan Tate, a homegrown player that they traded for back in 2018, as he was part of the big fire sale in 2018. They got that prospect back, and he's been very good. So the Orioles have done a good job developing their relievers. The question now is, are they going to capitalize on some of the great career years that we've seen from some of these relievers in the bullpen, like a Felix Bautista, like a Cionel Perez, or do we think that the Orioles are done dealing bullpen arms?
See, I don't know if they're done dealing bullpen arms so far, but I don't think Cionel Perez and Felix Bautista are the names to look at, just because those are younger guys. Jorge Lopez, this was his first year of success as a reliever at the major league level, but he was still a little bit older, whereas Felix Bautista, Cionel Perez, a little bit younger. I think the Orioles will probably want to hang on to them for at least a little bit longer. One name that I would look at as still a potential trade piece is Dylan Tate. He's not that old and is still under team control for a while. Doesn't become a free agent until the 2026 season. But Tate has a little bit better of a track record, which didn't seem like it mattered much with Jorge Lopez. But Tate has had pretty consistent success as a reliever over the past few seasons and could command some solid prospects in return if the Orioles decide to deal him at the deadline as well.
Tate, 28 years old, and a 2.22, I should say, ERA so far this season in 44 appearances. If the Orioles do make another move, it might not be in the bullpen. Could be an Anthony Santander at the big league level if they continue the trend of trading position players that they started yesterday with Trey Mancini And Brendan, this team is currently 1 game above 500. They are still a couple games out of the wild card spot. And while we have seen significant improvement from the big league team, it's pretty clear that the Orioles see their best days as still pretty far ahead in 2023, 2024, and beyond. And while the team is focused right now, I would say, on making the postseason, and Brandon Hyde is putting out his best lineup to do that every night, and the players are trying their hardest to do that, clearly the Orioles are trying not just to sneak into the postseason in October 2022, but be a legitimate contender in 2023 and beyond.
Right, just because this season has been kind of a pleasant surprise for the Baltimore Orioles so far this year doesn't mean that you're going to deviate from the plan. And the plan, of course, being that you're going to be able to compete and win over the next few seasons when we're seeing more prospects get called up to the big league level. Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall, Gunnar Henderson, those are names that we're going to start seeing soon. And that's when the Orioles are really going to start winning baseball games. And maybe we'll see them even buy at the trade deadline over the next few seasons. But that's not the plan for right now. We are still in the beginning phases of the Orioles kind of getting back to their winning ways here. And clearly Mike Elias is not going to deviate from the structure that has gotten them to this point.
We saw Josh Hader traded by a team that is currently in first place in their division in the Milwaukee Brewers yesterday. So these teams that come from smaller markets that may find themselves in the middle of a playoff race still have to walk a fine line of opening their window for contention for as long as possible, as well as for as wide as possible. So while the Orioles still, again, are hoping to make the postseason this year, you have to keep in mind that they are looking to build a competitive team year in and year out. And right now, they don't quite have the major league talent to do so, but the hope is that these players that they acquired today can extend their window of having a legitimate World Series contender over the next couple seasons. So let's take a look once again at the trade details for Jorge Lopez, because it involves 4 prospects coming to Baltimore, and it involves Jorge Lopez as well as cash considerations going to Minnesota. It's Yennier Cano, who's a righty, Cade Povich, probably the centerpiece of this deal, Juan Nunez, and Juan Rojas. So 4 pitching prospects coming the Orioles' way in exchange for Lopez and cash considerations. Brendan, final thoughts for you. I would say that the Orioles have made it clear that they intend to prioritize position players early in the draft, and they are acquiring pitchers via trade and hopefully via free agency over the next couple of years. This appears to follow that model as they acquire 4 pitchers in exchange for Lopez and cash.
Yeah, Povich was a relatively early round draft pick. Like you mentioned, he was a 3rd round pick out of Nebraska in 2021. But the Orioles, as you mentioned, have been prioritizing those position players early on in the draft. Probably think they're a little safer and can recognize the tools there a little better. But Povich, at least so far, has proven that he is a solid high A pitcher right now and has shown a lot of potential going forward as he continues to move up throughout professional baseball. So the Orioles have clearly seen enough in Povich at the high A level that they believe he has enough potential to possibly get to the major league level a few years down the line.
Couple more comments before we get out of here as we are live on Facebook and YouTube. Somebody asking, who becomes the Orioles' de facto closer now? We've seen Felix Bautista used in that role when Jorge Lopez has had an especially large workload. Brendan, I tend to think that Felix Bautista would slot naturally into that role. Again, assuming he is not traded at this deadline, which I tend to think he won't be, Bautista would be a natural fit for the closer role, considering the incredible stuff he has and his propensity to succeed in high leverage situations.
Yeah, I think it's probably Felix Bautista, Paul. Like you said, his stuff is just overwhelming at times to the point where it would make sense to put him in that closer role. His ERA, believe it or not, is actually better right now than Jorge Lopez's 1.68. So I think Bautista fills in pretty naturally to that closer role. I think you probably just bump everybody up an inning. Maybe Dylan Tate becomes your 7th inning guy, Cianel Perez maybe we'll see in the 8th, and then Felix Bautista in the 9th. It's still a very solid back end of the bullpen here for the O's.
So that'll just about wrap up our show here just around 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Brendan Mortenson's Twitter handle is @BrendanMorty. I am @Paul Mancano. Please keep updating your Twitter feeds. Keep refreshing those Twitter feeds because we're seeing trades being done all around Major League Baseball, and this will not be the only time that we go live on Facebook and YouTube today, as we are still awaiting the 6 p.m. trade deadline, and certainly deadlines will spur some action, and the Orioles could still make some more moves as we get closer and closer to the trade deadline tonight. Thanks to Tim Leitert for producing this podcast. Thanks to you for following along and commenting along during this show. And we will be back at the latest at around 5:45 to get you ready for the MLB trade deadline. In the meantime, we'll catch you next time.